Hello and welcome to the Asama Maru incident. Now, the theory is, today, on 21st of January, I will record this all in an hour and 20 minutes. Well, from the moment I say start, it'll be an hour and 20 minutes. And therefore you'll get a rough sort of real-time idea of how long the crew were aboard, the boarding party were aboard the Asama Maru. How long it took them to go through 800 passengers, weed out 50 Germans, interview those Germans, and decide which 21 to take away. It's not a long amount of time. Now, I haven't pressed start on the timer yet, and that's because I want to sort of A, welcome you to the 21st of January, but B, explain that is what we're going to be doing. So, I will now press the timer. Wish me luck. So, what happened first? At 12:16 hours, the Asama Maru was sighted by HMS Liverpool. She sighted at really long range. Liverpool doesn't send out a radio signal at this point. She doesn't communicate by any other means. She tries to get close. And she does get close. She gets within signal range, which is flag range. And direct signalling, as in flashing. So, signal is sent. What ship? If you can imagine, goes click, click, click with the light shutters to shine a bright light at the Asama Maru. Asama Maru responds by hoisting its flags. We are the Asama Maru, JXFC. So, 12:44 hours, stop your vessel instantly. Wow, there's some really bad spelling going on here, I do apologise today. There's stop and there's also blank instead of black instead of blank there. Well, I'm gonna say this, I should have noticed it last night, but you know, keep going because it's got to be done in the hour and 20 minutes. Heave to, stop at once. Still no notice taken. 12:53 hours, Asama Maru was still proceeding at 18 knots. So, the 3-pounder signal gun, which fires only a blank round, not black round, probably is black, but no, it's a blank round. 3-pounder gun is fired, and she stops. Liverpool doesn't need to turn her 6-inch gun, doesn't need to use her 4-inch high-angle air defence guns, none machine guns, nothing like that. It's just a 3-pounder. I'm sending a boat. It's flown. And this is a flag which is put up. So there's been ON raised and then CFH raised. You know, I've used the brackets to signal when they're using flags rather than when they're using the clicky light flash. There is actually a proper name for it, but now I'm under this time pressure, I honestly can't remember it. It's great. Joys of history. So, 30 hours, boarding party led by Lieutenant Commander Greenway arrived, and at 2:35 hours, the boarding party left the ship. Board for an hour and 20 minutes. In an hour and 20 minutes, they go through 800 passengers, find the 50 Germans, interview those Germans, and decide which 21 they're taking with them. On a huge ship. This is not an easy task, and they do it. They do it well. Now, one of the interesting things you'll notice here is they are not using their radio. Liverpool is not communicating by radio. And the Asama Maru herself isn't also sending off radio messages, apparently. You know how we know this? Because despite it taking place so close to Japan, the Japanese do not come out. Aircraft do not come out to interfere. The ships don't come out. So, when you hear modern discussions going on about communicating in the background of the enemy and not being heard, well, just think, Navies have actually been doing it for a long time. Signal flashing, flags. These are all skills which Nelson would have understood in terms of the flag ones, Yet they are still as viable today. And they still work. They just require practice. They're very old skills, but they work. In 1940, this allowed HMS Liverpool to conduct a complex operation at sea with a foreign merchant vessel and not get hurt by that merchant vessel's power, even though it's right next door to them. "12:56 hours, I'm sending a boat." Just give me a second. I'm sending a boat. It's always a fun one. They dispatched the pinnace. Now, the pinnace is an interesting little ship. It's the only thing considered fast enough to make it across in the waters. And if you think, we often consider the Pacific to be quite a calm ocean, but the water was quite steady, quite deep, and so they realised they needed something at this point which was going to be fast. But also there's a problem with the pinnace. The pinnace is not the biggest of Liverpool's boats, so it kind of shrinks the boarding party that you can tend to take. This isn't actually Liverpool's pinnace. I've been trying to search for it for a long, for about a month or so, trying to search for a decent picture of it. I couldn't find it. This is one of the ones which is preserved. This is actually the National Maritime Museum, I think, has preserved one. And it's a good example of what they look like. But it's really, I doubt Liverpool's one mounted a 3-pounder gun on the front. Probably by this time she would be mounting a machine gun of some kind. And I'm not sure if hers was steam powered, but it was certainly that size. Hers might have been one of the new petrol powered ones which they had coming in this time. She is, after all, a fairly brand new cruiser, so she might have got the brand new pinnace. Saying that, there is at least one town class cruiser I know did actually have a steam powered pinnace aboard, because there are complaints going back to the Admiralty about the difficulty of finding space to stow coal. So there is a possibility that she did have a steam powered one, but I doubt it. I think it was petrol. So, at 1:15, as the boarding party arrives. The boarding party consists of Lieutenant Commander Greenway. Now, I think this is him. I know his name's G.H. Greenway from the document, and I think the G stands for George. And this is disturbing when I say I think, because I've gone through the crew manifests and these things, and they're all handwritten, and they usually reuse their initials, so it's difficult to track down. So, I've done my best to track him down. This is what I've come up with. And I found this picture because the submarine he was serving on, he was actually in command of during World War II, his second submarine command, sinks in the Mediterranean. Disappears with all hands. This is who I found. I think it is him. It fits him. Next one I looked up was, of course, Lieutenant Colin Madden. Now, these days, when you type Madden into a search engine, do not expect to get humans that often. But I tracked him down, and I couldn't find a picture from him, but I managed to find this obituary. And I realised that even the people at the Telegraph couldn't find a picture of him. Which is sort of cruel, because he goes on to have a wonderful career, a really exciting career, including saving Dutch royal family and doing all sorts of things. He took part in the America and back in the New York Bermuda sailboat race and all sorts of things. He's a really go-getting hero type, and yet there's no picture to him. But that's not the worst of him. The lieutenant stood up. He's critical. He's an engineering officer, but he speaks German, so he's the one of the group who's going to be critical to the interviews and decision making. And you're looking at this big sheet and going, where is he on here? Well, under Rear Admiral, Chief Inspector of Gun Mountings, and this is thanks to the Scottish Maritime Museum's page, I found this. He is listed as a Lieutenant Commander. 1st of July 1940, MEP stood up. I can't find any other record of him other than here or in Liverpool's logs for the Asama Maru incident. I have searched them black and blue. I have caused the people at the UK National Archives, who are wonderful, lovely, kind people, to literally despair of me trying to track down details about this gentleman. He's critical, but you can't find him. So, the boarding party has arrived. The boarding party are going to be doing a lot of information gathering, a lot of research gathering. But mostly they are here to look for the particular crew they need. And the crew they're looking for are the technical specialists. The people with navigation skills or engineering skills or motivation which can make them useful to the German Navy or the German war effort. So they don't care about your average fat businessman. Excuse that explanation, but you know. What they care about are people with the relevant skills. Which is interesting, because we'll be looking at the definitions as we go on to legalities later. But, and here's the critical thing, think about that today. I did this in an article for the British Interest, which has been published this morning. Think about who might be considered to have relevant skills today. It's actually expanded over what it used to be. So, let's move on to the background to Japan-UK relations. And fairly sure that's not supposed to be there yet. But we'll leave that and hope it works. If it doesn't, you'll get to watch live me fixing a PowerPoint. That's Admiral Percy Noble, who is the Commander-in-Chief China Station. He's critical. He's having to manage all this and he's not able to communicate. He has to trust his officers will do what he's telling to do, will carry out his missions without actually being able to be with them all the time and without being able to communicate them. And without being able to communicate often in real time with the people back in the UK. Remember, his high command is 9 hours behind him. When it's midday with him, it's 3 AM with them. They're all asleep in bed, they're lazy. No, of course they're not. There's a cover up. There's some officers on duty, but it's all going to be the junior ones. Because they need to run the war going on in Europe. They need to get their own sleep. So he's on his own. He's losing equipment. He's hemorrhaging equipment back to the UK, back to the Mediterranean. He's losing cruisers, he's losing destroyers, he's losing ships left, right and centre. Yet he's still having to do his job. And this occasion, he's having to run a very complex operation without also being able to talk to the ship doing the complex operation, because they can't talk back, because that would reveal where they are. And that's the key for this operation. The Japanese don't know where the British are, so therefore they can't counter them. The British could be anywhere, so they have to be everywhere to try and cover for British interference. Yeah. Alright, this is going to be fixed. else over here. So, this is what they're dealing with at this moment. You've got attacks going on in Canton. These are some of the incidents happening in 1938. There is a war going on in China thanks to the Japanese, and Percy Noble is having to deal with it. So, as you're originally supposed to see it, here comes Percy. It works. Right. So what he's coming to increasingly rely on are his flotilla of sloops. They're the present ships that he's using. Now, usually, and as we discussed when we talk about the Tsingtao incident and various other parts, these are force multipliers. They are the equivalent of modern offshore patrol vessels. The River class. They're actually a little smaller than the River class, we'll leave that to one side. These are their equivalents. Their role is to act as force multipliers to the cruisers, to the larger escorts, which are there to provide the presence. So, you have your cruiser goes into a main harbour. A sloop would go into a smaller village harbour, a little bit along the coast, and suddenly there's multiple British warships arrived. The reality is this one isn't much of a fighting vessel, it's more a presence vessel, but it gives the effect. It's like having a helicopter in a way and various other things, but actually more useful. So, this is the British planning though. This is what they're going, because they are planning for a war. They are planning for a war which is going to be a big one against Japan. So, you think about it. These are the plans and the cruiser dispositions for fighting a war with Japan, where the Royal Navy wanted its forces. Technically, they've got 28 cruisers sitting here at Hong Kong. The odds are they get moved up to Weihai Wei, which is just up there, because that's a lot closer to the Japanese main islands and for carrying out a blockade. But they're technically listed at Hong Kong in this planning, because the Royal Navy actually hides, even in its plans, where its base is going to be. Rather clever of it, or disturbingly paranoid of it, depending on your perspective. So, but this is war in Europe. So Percy Noble is having to manage the whole threat of Japan, which they have worked out, the Admiralty and the various chiefs of the China Station have worked out would require uh, 52 cruisers positioned in Southeast Asia, with another 4 sitting over the other side of the Pacific and various more in second lines, with HMS Liverpool, HMS Birmingham here, star of Tsingtao, actually no longer here, heading back to the Mediterranean as we speak. and 3 old D-class cruisers. That's what he's got. He hasn't got enough, but he's doing his best. Anyway, we have to move on. The Asama Maru. This is, of course, today's primary subject, one of them. And hopefully, we're about 20 minutes in. Ooh! I'm running 15 seconds fast. Good lord, I'm supposed to spend about 10 minutes on the subject, so we'll see what I can do. Yeah. Can I talk for 10 minutes on the Asama Maru? Well, the NYK line is the Japanese equivalent of Cunard, of White Star. She is this this mythical ship. They're Japan's premier. They're star of their show, of their fleet. So it would have been like the Japanese Navy stopping the Queen Mary or the Queen Elizabeth cruise liners just off the coast of Harwich. This is what is taking place 12 hours ago, if my time is all right. So, 16,500 tons. 16,500 tons. Think about that. She's got about 8 decks. Carries 800 passengers, all sorts of freight. She is colossal. But she's actually, in 1940, not that advanced for her time. In fact, she has a few issues. And 18 knots, which she's doing, is probably as fast as she goes. Sadly enough, though, she won't survive World War II. But she's a good-looking ship. And this is one of the lovely postcards they produce of her. And trust me, you'll be seeing more postcards because I do like a good, well-produced postcard. I prefer them to the colorized pictures in some ways because we get colorized photos. They are lovely and they can be done very well. But a colorized photo versus a postcard doesn't show you what they wanted to show you. Colorized photo, a postcard shows you the image they wanted to project. This is what they wanted to project. And this is very Japanese. You can almost say there is sort of this red coming up around the ship is sort of symbolism of the land of the rising sun, if you want to look into it. You've got all these beautiful colours, but you've got this strong, sturdy ship in the foreground. And here you have this little tugboat to illustrate the size of this magnificent ship. Look, a teeny tug. And lots of people might have seen tugboats, very few might have seen her. So it gives them a reference to scale. HMS Liverpool. Now, theoretically, this photo is taken in 1938, and I picked this photo for a reason. HMS Birmingham earlier will have shown you a town class from the front, and they are sisters, so pretty much identical. What this does is show you nicely why she was so good at finding what she was sent to find. This is taken in 1938. She's very, very new at this point. You can see the aft 6-inch gun turrets. You can see the 4-inch high-angle air defense systems. You can even, if you look close enough, see the more rapid fire olicons, pom-poms and machine guns. And, all important, torpedoes. Remember, a Royal Navy cruiser is not a Royal Navy cruiser if it's not festooned with torpedoes, because The Royal Navy doesn't believe these are only weapons for destroyers. These are weapons for everyone, because torpedoes make holes in the hull let in water. Water sinks ships. So as far as the Royal Navy is concerned, if you get in torpedo range of any of our ships, they should have torpedoes to launch at you. What does she have that makes her so good at her job though? Well, she's tall, which allows for a good view. She's got a lot of crew, which allows for lookouts, but oh yes, the big thing here. She's got 2 massive hangars. In fact, it's one colossal hangar, but 2 massive entries. And she's carrying 3 aircraft. 2 fully assembled, 1 partially assembled. So she is literally loaded to the bear with all the scout systems and all the things she needs to start looking at. And that's what she's going for. She's off searching the world, searching the trade, searching the ocean to find the Asama Maru, but not just the Asama Maru. Remember, on her first patrol, she stops 3 other ships. On her second patrol, she will stop more ships. The Asama Maru is a critical stop. It's the one she was signalled yesterday. In the early hours of yesterday morning, she was sent a signal, you will track down this ship and you will stop her. She should be approaching you. And that is what she's done. She has plucked the Asama Maru out of all that ocean. And yes, she has kind of loaded it to her advantage, because she did turn up exactly where the Asama Maru was supposed to be. Because the Asama Maru is going for Yokohama Harbour, so therefore turning up there is a good idea. Turning up over there, turning up close, you know the trade route's in. You know what route she's likely to be on. Her likely speed of progress, her likely position on that trade route, because lots of ships go these routes. Ships don't suddenly go, you know what, I need to go there, so I'm going to go down here, up there, then to there, and then back to there. No, I need to go there, I'm here, as straight a line as possible. It's the beauty of the ocean, they can do that. You don't have to worry about road networks or traffic jams or railway strikes. But it does make you a little bit in terms of predictability for a cruiser which is hunting you. And this is what's happened. So, this beautiful ship has found this lovely ship. Both are rather good looking. What I still find always the most interesting one, and one I hope the Royal Navy, as it's starting to get back to its worldwide presence, you know, and especially if we do go all out global Britain, is I would hope they start painting ships white again. This sort of presence white, because grey, it's a lovely colour, but it's very dull, and let's be honest, in the modern age of radar and all the other systems, you might as well be painted white. I know, seriously, they should be painted grey for warfighting, we all know this. In fact, honestly, returning to some of the camouflage techniques of World War II might be quite cool, but, and this is the big but, for presence missions, turning up in a glistening white warship is a very big, here I am. I'm so confident, I know you can see me and I don't care. She's doing theoretically a stealth mission off the coast of Japan to track down one of their most prized merchant ships, and she is bright white. This is one hell of a brave ship. Also a very good ship, but you know. Now, theoretically, if I've timed this all right, we'll be roughly heading for 155 at some point during the discussion of this slide. So, the boarding. How did it go? Well, it was actually pretty good. It seems to be fairly straightforward. One of the great things you have in the UK is National Archives, and it is a real pleasure to use it. The fact that some people debate over it being called a TNA or not in its designations is nothing to worry about, frankly. I will use a TNA. But ADM 1164157. It's the Asama Maru incident. It has a huge folder of all the legal stuff that happens, all the political stuff that happens, all the naval stuff that's happening. Everything is included in this. And it's worthwhile reading because this is the account by Lieutenant Commander Greenway. And if he is the officer who I suspect he is, and he does die during World War II, this is one of his legacies, this report. And what's interesting is how he categorizes the officers under him, how he works through the scenarios going on. Yes, it follows a fairly much a naval standard in terms of its beginning, middle, end, but it all points out. And one of the interesting things is he's critiquing himself. I find this story quite interesting. In view of the importance of causing as little delay as possible to the ship, I did not consider expedient to waste further time by signing the official log. The captain did not ask me to, and I considered that he would only have been irritated by the further delay. I did not then know that the boat had not yet returned from Liverpool after her first trip. I was influenced in this decision by the fact that although the Naval Price Manual states in Article 96 that the visiting officer should sign the ship's log, it also indicates in Appendix 7 that this was not the common practice in the last war. The boarding party finally left the ship at 2:35, having been aboard 1 hour and 20 minutes. He's very efficient in terms of giving his credit, and credit also to the chief officer and purser of the ship, because of the Asama Maru, because they were critical in carrying out this operation, and they were very helpful. So all this goes into it. But one of those interesting things is it's the way it's going on. I like coming back to the fact that he didn't sign the logbook, because there is a debate over whether or not he should have. It's standard practice, according to the rules, he should have done. But as he said, during the previous World War I, it hadn't been considered common practice because there wasn't the time. And on this occasion, there wasn't the time. So he makes a judgment call. And I don't want to labour a point too much, but that's what this all is, this whole operation is. Because if we consider it, it's 3 AM in the morning back in the UK, so there is definitely not much oversight coming from the UK. No, Percy Noble can't be in direct communication because that would reveal the Liverpool's position. The captain of Liverpool, Brind, I'm not sure. I think I said the right captain's name. Captain of Liverpool can't get involved either because, again, communications, he's got a flashlight, he can't be there. He's on his ship. So it all comes down to this lieutenant commander, this young officer on this ship with barely a dozen other sailors to back him up, making a decision, making a judgment call. And every single level of command has to trust that he will make the right decision. And the great thing is, I read this document and not a single senior officer, not a single politician, not a single foreign officer, a foreign FCO ambassador critiques it. They all note, it wasn't signed, but they understand the reasons. They note it wasn't signed, but they understand the reasons. Not a single one suggests censure or anything. You think about that, that's an incredible amount of trust That's an incredible amount of respect for a very junior officer, which is critical. What's interesting though is it spreads not just Lieutenant Commander Greenway. These are the reports from the next two officers. Colin Madden, Lieutenant. He's pretty much second in command of the boarding group. I think he's the senior lieutenant on this one. Stoddart is an engineering officer, but he seems to spend most of his time with Lieutenant Commander Greenway as his translator. And it's the German skills which are critical that he brings. It seems to be that all three of these officers seem to have had a smattering of Japanese. And definitely, of course, the Japanese crew had a good quality English. So that made their life easier. But they do, all three officers, from their remarks, seem to have understood quite easily what commands and instructions were going backwards and forwards between the Japanese crew. So either the Japanese crew was speaking the whole time in English, which is unlikely, especially considering the captain was annoyed with the Royal Navy officers being aboard, so we no doubt has spoken to his junior officers in Japanese to try and, well, cause the Royal Navy a little bit of trouble, but they seem to have known it. And they even point out, then gave way grudgingly and gave an order to the first officer in Japanese, comes from Stoddart's account, so we know that that's sort of going on. They are all going through their various accounts and they're all giving their accounts. What's interesting is the different things that come through, you know, with Madden, we have notations about taking over the first class saloon, about the fact that his personnel were only armed with pistols, about the fact that they are all acting according to Naval Prize Manual Article 98 and what they're doing with it. What's also interesting is that the three officers stay together for the second return trip of the pinnace. They send their ratings back across first. They keep some of the ratings with them, but they send mostly ratings with the German prisoners back across to Liverpool first. And then they take the rest of the prisoners with them. What's also interesting is Stoddart here is going through quite technical details of what the officers were. The German passengers were brought before us in succession, and those found to be in the category of officers or technicians were ordered to collect their luggage, accompanied by members of the boarding party, and the remainder dismissed. As each one was dealt with, he was ticked off by the purser on the passenger list. What's also interesting to note is that they managed to do it in such a way that it's quite genial. And even the captain of the Asama Maru, who is still absolutely furious, notes at the end that whilst he did not think that we were entitled to remove his passengers, he had no complaints otherwise. And that the Royal Navy personnel had been utmost respectfully to him and his crew. He was very genial, in fact, it's noted in the last one. A small number of passengers had stood around watching them while they were doing it. All were Japanese, apart from an American reporter and his wife. Again, no particular emotion is noted amongst the onlookers. And what I find interesting is there aren't actually pictures or any reports I've been able to find of the boarding. I've tried to look from that American reporter and I haven't been able to find it. So if anyone on the internet can find the reports from that American reporter, please send them my way. I'd be really interested. Right, so what does this all tell us? What does ADM 116-4157 tell us? It tells you what the Royal Navy was going through. Now, I've always contested that this operation is in many ways about more than just the prisoners. And it really is. But the prisoners are a critical point. So, here is the German conundrum. They have the Battle of the River Plate. Now, I've been discussing that a lot last year. The Battle of the River Plate, the Admiral Graf Spee, their surface radar going around the South Atlantic causing all sorts of trouble. The trouble is she didn't get home. Not only did she not get home, she gets destroyed. Her sister, up here, soon to be known as the Lutzo, gets recalled very quickly. They don't want her sunk. But also, there isn't much safety for up there. These seas, the ocean, is a Royal Navy blue at this point. Yeah, you know, the Italians haven't yet entered the war. And honestly, the French, it's a phony war period, okay? There's not much going on. And what is going on at sea, and the Royal Navy overwhelmingly out-infrastructures, out-presences the German Navy. Overwhelmingly so. Told you I liked these postcards. The Columbus. Seriously, I swear there was someone somewhere churning out these postcards of every single liner which looked so similar. They all look like they're thrusting through the ocean at full speed, you know, charging along. Actually, the Columbus wasn't that fast. Well, not by 1939, 1940. And, actually, 1939. She gets caught. She sinks herself rather than get caught, and her crew abandon ship and get taken to America. And it's this crew which is the Royal Navy's furiously watching, but honestly, it's crew from the Northern Line. There is a sort of American-German line, and it's got lots and lots of German sailors. There are points up to 1,000 German sailors are in the Americas. And the Royal Navy's worried about them. The Royal Navy doesn't want to get them home because they have technical skills, they have capabilities, they are fit, healthy, they know the world's waterways. These are people who could cause significant trouble for the Royal Navy if they get home. And so they don't want to. This is the world. This is what the Royal Navy is in charge of protecting, as far as they're concerned. The critical merchant shipping which makes up the world's movements. The Pacific looks sparse. And honestly, you can start to see the British Empire moves shunk. The informal empire, formal empire. You can see where all the trade goes. You can see how critical the Mediterranean is. From a trade perspective, the Royal Navy's deployments around the world suddenly start to make a great deal of sense. You start to see that the China fleet isn't so much about controlling this area, it's about stopping the spread of potential threats to this area. Which is probably why war plans combine all the naval forces from this area into one command structure and go, you will not get through. But it also starts to make sense of why the South Atlantic Command has a South American division. All that trade. The same with the West Indies and all sorts of other things. The Royal Navy's movement around the world makes sense. But also when you're looking at these big trade routes, these are also other people's trade routes. Yes, that's the trade routes to the UK, but those also are the trade routes which are going to Europe in the 1930s. These are the trade routes. Yes, they have the big British ships on, but they also have the big German ships on, the big French ships on, the big Polish ships, the big Russian ships, the big Japanese ships, the big American ships, and they all have crews. All these routes are the lucrative routes. These are the routes they have people on. And it becomes a problem. Not much of one they can deal with, but it's a problem still. And this means there are German crews over here when war breaks out who can't get home. Because as we've been over it, the Royal Navy have cruisers all around here. They have ships all around here. And as the Asama Maru incident shows, they have ships over here. But prior to that, what was the plan? Well, the plan was simple. And if you're sitting in Berlin, or maybe even North America, this might seem like a very clever idea. Hang on. The Royal Navy is diverting forces to the Atlantic to fight the war. They are here. That means they can't be here. But there's still trade going across here. So if we get one of our allies, our friendships, to pick up our people here, take them across here, they get to here, get on the train, and go all the way across to here. Remember, they haven't invaded Russia yet. Seriously, the person who thought of that plan must have been so happy. They must have literally been going, yippee, I have an idea, I can solve the problem. We all know the problem. Yes, the Royal Navy are moving ships over here, but they still have ships over here. You can see the plan. The plan is lovely on paper, but in reality, is it going to work? It's a nice plan, because again, think about it. If you can make it work, and if the Germans have been paying attention, they've been noticing the Royal Navy's been doing something similar with officer transfers for a good few years by this point, where young officers, when they need to get back to the UK rather quicker and they don't want to take their ship back, end up getting the train across. It works, it's an idea, but the trouble is, as I said, the Royal Navy is still there, and it leads to the Asama Maru incident. But it is a good plan on paper. I'm trying to sell it as a good plan, honestly. There's part of me sitting there going, why did they even consider it? And then the part of me goes, I understand, it's desperation. They've got no other options. They've got this pool of resource, these thousands of sailors sitting there who they cannot use, who are skilled people, and they need them. Their navy needs them, especially after the River Plate, especially after the loss of the Grass Bay, the loss of all those sailors. They are losing, they are hemorrhaging skilled personnel. Anything they can to get them back is probably worthwhile, but still, it is a Hail Mary plan. Very much so. So, how did the Royal Navy do it? How did they find out about it? I think the interesting thing is to note is that Liverpool receives the message yesterday. It's the 20th when she gets told to look out for the Asama Maru in particular. And we've been over when the Asama Maru left port. So the Asama Maru has been on her way for a while. That suggests it wasn't a direct source of information. So that suggests it wasn't harbour manifests or anyone in the local harbour where those German sailors got ashore, went to board the ship. But at some point, the Royal Navy gets the information. At some point, the British get the information. The only potential source of information is in America. Now, here's the thing. If it had been a regular spy route, presumably the information would come through quicker. And the British running a full-blown spying operation in America above what you would have from having people with theoretical diplomatic covers is unlikely. It could cause a lot more issues than it could solve. How about the informal network? That explains it more than anything else, and explains the timing. You see, the informal network, and this is what's critical, is what you would consider it if Chinese whispers are going on and they need to verify it. So they're stopping Japanese merchant ships anyway. They're stopping those ships because they are causing trouble. They are stopping those ships causing trouble in terms of their worry about contraband, not causing trouble in terms of being surface raiders. So there's a different thing there, but it's trouble. So they are stopping them. But why Asama Maru in particular? Why is that picked up? Why is Liverpool sent together? Well, my theory is that the information finds its way back to Washington. And a friend in Washington has a chat with someone British in Washington. Because the one area of information which all the files are curiously reticent about is where the Royal Navy, where Britain gets the information from to go and track down the Asama Maru. This is why I think it's an informal source, because there is none of the regular covers. If they'd said intelligence, that would suggest an espionage effort of either in Japan or Germany or wherever, but they don't say that. So, more and more, I'm thinking it's an informal source. It is something which is not the normal route. And again, I think this comes down to a friendship. I think someone approaches the British and goes, there's something you ought to know about. There's something happening which you need to know. And you need to put a stop to. And that's what they do. So how do the British Royal Navy do it? Well, once they know that's happening, these are the routes. So there's this northerly route and this southerly route. There's also a really southerly route, but seeing as where Asama Maru was coming from, it's this route, most likely. And that actually makes sense. And that also fits with where she's intercepted and how the Liverpool is working towards it. So, she's intercepted. Well, hey, we're thinking, yes, we've managed to intercept our deadly foe, the liner, the Asama Maru. We've got the Germans off her. And that's all fine if it's just the one thing, and if it's just about deterring the Germans, and it's the information comes in. But here's the thing. The Royal Navy's already been out there. The Royal Navy's already been using the pretext of German merchant sailors trying to get home to search Japanese ships. Before the Asama Maru came on the scene, before it even got to sea, they've been doing it. So why were they there in the first place? Why was there a Royal Navy cruiser sitting there? already. And not just any cruiser, the only town class cruiser that is currently out in the Far East. Why? Well, simple really. It's not as much about the Germans as the Germans would certainly want to believe, and as the Royal Navy was probably making out. It's also about the Japanese. Because if you consider these trading routes are British and Dominion merchant shipping, so where they get thickest, where there is most of these ships around. If you were applying a similar analysis to the Japanese, they'd be thick here and here and here. The thick routes will be coming to here. This is where they'll be getting thick. This is economic warfare as deterrence. This is the Royal Navy turning around to the Japanese and going, do you really want to fight us? Because we can play right in your backyard and you can't do the same to us. We can come really close and intercept not just any merchant ship, but the pride of your merchant fleet, and you can't stop us. Yes, you will throw a hissy fit. Yes, you will be upset. But no, you can't do anything about this. You can't stop us. And that's what they're doing. That's what they're saying. Watch was vibrating because the phone was getting messages and I was worried it would stop recording, but it hasn't. So we can carry on. I won't have to start again, and again. So far it's happened to me 3 times. Oy, caramba, that and students. It's been a fun day. So, this is about the Royal Navy deterring Japan as much as it's stopping Germans getting merchant supplies. This is a 2-for-1. And what's great is, as added bonus, the Americans are going to see it. And the Americans are going to know that the Royal Navy is still a player in the Pacific. The Americans will hear about it. Royal Navy will still be a player in the Pacific, so therefore the Royal Navy, Britain, is still useful to America in the Pacific. So keeping the Britain going in the Atlantic is advantageous to the Americans from that angle. Royal Navy knows how to make politics. So, the legality. Well, the legality starts off the moment they board her, because the captain contests, stating that by international law, it was only contraband cargo that belligerents were entitled to remove from neutral ships on the high seas. He also states that they made a voyage from London to Kobe, commencing about 21st August 1939, with German passengers aboard and no attempt made by British authorities to remove any Germans. This is a constant case. This is a case of no. And again, there is some very bad copying going on there. It's a strong case, isn't it? Well, which law? And that's the first problem. The response from Greenway is, by international law, he's fully entitled to remove from the ships for German subjects who are returning to their country to assist in the war effort. With regard to his voyage from London to Kirby, I told him that the reason why no action was taken was probably because his voyage started before the war had been declared. Interesting point of law, that is considered standard. If the voyage starts before the war is declared, theoretically, you aren't supposed to board it and take people off. But, here's the debate. It doesn't stop their day. We can all wish it would, but it doesn't. The legality continues. And this is the really interesting debate. So, to start off, the Japanese produced Article 47 of the Declaration of London. Any individual embodied in the armed forces of the enemy who is found on board a neutral merchant vessel may be made a prisoner of war, even though there be no ground for the capture of the vessel. Okay. But, the Japanese go, these people were not embodied in the armed forces of the enemy. Therefore, the British were illegal. It's true. Apart from 3 small minor issues. 1, what's the definition of an individual embodied in the armed forces? Do you include people with skills who can be called up, who are people who are reserves, people who are only currently serving in the armed forces, not who just recently left, people who are government agents who may or may not have involvement in government war plans, people who are critical engineers, noted scientists? What are you including as embodied in the armed forces? Because all these people have a role. Secondly, and this is the biggest issue with invoking the Article of London, the Declaration of London, in the Article 47. The really crucial, critical, massive issue, the massive issue. No one ratified it. It never happened as far as international law is concerned because no one ratified it. Yes, it was agreed in London, so therefore the British should be adopting it, but the Admiralty advised the British government to not ratify it. So British Parliament didn't ratify it because, as it was eventually written, was absolutely terrible for naval warfare. So it wasn't done. Besides which, this was done in 1908, the Declaration of London. World War I has happened since, as have nearly 32 years. It ain't gonna wash with anyone at this point because so much of the world had changed. What was understood by during the Declaration of London as being forces embodied is not forces embodied now. And certainly not today if we're thinking about it. It gets worse though. Because the Japanese are basing all their claim on this Article 47, so the British turn around and go, well, it's a good job you're making this case because the Germans' own definition from their 1939 prize ordinance of who or who cannot be removed and who is an individual embodied in the armed force of the enemy is number 1, the passengers in the captured vessel must be released. Right? However, 2, the following are accepted. Members of the enemy armed forces, persons who are making the voyage in order to put themselves in the service of the enemy armed forces, and 3, agents of the enemy. Don't you love a loosely worded phraseology? Welcome to international law, welcome to maritime law, where the loosely worded phraseology is king. Queen, emperor, empress, god, whatever you want to use as your phrase. Members of the enemy armed forces, persons who are making the voyage in order to put themselves in the service of the enemy armed forces, and agents of the enemy. It gives the Germans carte blanche to basically take prisoner every fighting age male. After all, persons who are making the voyage in order to put themselves in the service of the enemy armed forces must include those people who could be legally conscripted. So basically, any guy 16 or over could theoretically be going to be conscripted in the war, so therefore they can be taken prisoner. And the armed forces, of course, but agents of the enemy. Well, this can mean anyone who's over the age of conscription who might have relevant skills, if you want to twist it. Theoretically, of course, you could say, oh, it just applies to people who are government officials, or this, or that, yes. But it doesn't say government officials. It doesn't say members of the government. It doesn't say, it just says agents of the enemy. Agents isn't defined. What's their agency? Sorry. A joke that my American listeners will hopefully understand. Everyone else, look up alphabet agencies. So, the Japanese were actually making a case the Germans couldn't make themselves. The British prize rules have been followed. You've heard a lot about Article 98. I could stick it up there, but you've heard pretty much every officer talking about it when I've discussed it. So, they have followed their article to the letter. The Royal Navy have followed their rules. The Germans are following their rules. The only ones making a stink are the Japanese. Why are the Japanese making a stink? For the same reason this operation is not all about the Germans. The Japanese are making a stink because the Royal Navy have done this in their backyard. Because the Royal Navy have shown up next door to Tokyo and have taken the pride of Japan virtually hostage for an hour and 20 minutes while they've plundered passengers off her. Within a short distance of one of their principal naval bases, within a short distance of their capital, of their cultural hub, of their economic hub, of their national place of centre, this took place. It's devastating and they need to do something. So they're making this. They are saying the British are acting illegally. They're trying to make any case they can. By the way, one of those powers which was actually at the Declaration of London but didn't ratify it was Japan. Also Germany and America and lots of others. But Japan didn't ratify it, neither did Britain. So neither could claim it really. But the Japanese are going to anything to try and give themselves some grounds to complain upon. And it's all about a loss of face. But it's also about a strategic realization. Tsingtao took place in January 1939 and happened because the Imperial Japanese Navy understood the scenario the Japanese were facing. Asama Maru, I hate these tables. Asama Maru in 1940. Well, this is when the wider Japanese government starts to realize the strategic situation they are facing. The reality of protecting their commerce. Now, does it cause them to reconsider their plans? Not really. Does it make them think about convoys more? Does it make them realize they need a lot more escorts? Not really. It means they start thinking about things which are more to do with what they do to get rid of that infrastructure. The Japanese have a plan and have always had plans about how to get the Allies, the British, the Americans out of the Far East. They're strategic threats. So actually, Asama Maru incident probably tips the Japanese more towards the war party, if anything could be said to have done, and makes the eventual conflict more likely. But the lesson from it that the Japanese draw is that the British infrastructure of Hong Kong, of Singapore, must be taken, of Weihai Wei, must be taken to stop them having the ability to project power to the Japanese home islands. One small interesting fact though was that the Tam class cruisers, of course which Liverpool was an example and Birmingham from last year was an example, both would have had the range to do that operation with a little bit of support from the Royal Navy Fleet Auxiliaries from Australia. A little bit of support, but they could have done it. Almost as if the Royal Navy was also worried about the security of their bases. You always hope to retain Singapore, you hope to retain it, but life happens. So we have 10 minutes to go. 10 minutes till the boarding party leaves the Asama Maru. At this point, Lieutenant Commander Greenway is heading down. He has left the bridge, he's decided not to sign the logbook, and he's heading to get out. He's done all this and more to try and get through this as quickly as possible for them. He's done a fairly good job. It's not been an easy job. It's been a very complicated one. But he's done it. What are the long-term consequences? Well, for international law, there are a lot of them. Again, I refer you to the article that's appeared in the British Interest, but also there's going to be another article which is going to appear on Global Maritime History, which is going to have a lot more detail and a lot more references for those who want to look into the Asama Maru incident more. Legacy and lesson of Tsingtao 80. I need to have a lot of articles out there because people do tend to enjoy them. But also, and this is the big factor that's been bugging me and why I've written this, why I've done all this research. Asama Maru 80 is about more than just normal naval history. It's about maritime law, it's about international law, and it's about the relevance to this day. We have a lot of nations in the world and who are growing naval powers. And a lot of assessments on what naval power the West needs especially are based on the idea that the world's got more peaceful at sea. Anyone who's paid attention to the South China Sea will know that's not the case, but also recent incidents in the Straits of Hormuz. The sea is not a lawless place. There are lots of laws. Not as many as are on land, but there are lots of laws. But who enforces them? There is a reason that HMS Liverpool acts on the Asama Maru in international waters. If it invaded the national waters, the sovereign waters of Japan to do it, that would have been a whole other incident. And as we'll look at in the Altmark incident next month, that is a whole other incident. But they get away with it because Norway is Norway. But with Japan, they wouldn't have got away with it. It could have been what caused a war. It would have caused a war. So, you end up with a scenario going on, and it's a very simple scenario. The Royal Navy take the ship in the international waters because in international waters there might be a lot of declarations, there might even be a lot of treaties, but ultimately the only way to make another nation keep those treaties is to have your own warship on the scene. This is why navies are not like armies. Well, let me rephrase that. They are like armies, but whereas it's usually a minority of the army will be on peacetime policing issues, i.e. border patrol or that sort of thing, the whole of the Navy will be, the moment in peacetime, be on police issues, presence around the world, fishery protection, counter drugs, counter smuggling, deterrence operations. All these things are what a Navy considers peacetime. The interesting thing here is, when we're talking about the Asama Maru incident, the war is happening over here. And the operation is taking place over here. It's the other side of the world from the war. It is a peacetime police action. It's a deterrence mission that the Royal Navy is doing. They're not doing a war-fighting mission. It's a deterrence mission. And that's why they're acting as they are. They know it has actual connotations. They know it has actual things over and above what they are doing, but it is still a peacetime mission. And as such, this is what happens. But also, because it's peacetime over there, the Royal Navy is withdrawing. And I'm going to get into discussion at some point about the sending of the Prince of Wales. A battleship and a battle cruiser. They sound powerful units, don't they? But as we've gone over in Tsingtao, and as we've gone over in Asama Maru, what really worries and scares the Japanese are not the battleships. They're the Royal Navy's cruisers. Because it's cruisers which can interfere in all this trade. If the Royal Navy, for the same manpower, had been able to send 6 cruisers, then you would have been looking at possibly a very different scenario. But as it was, battleships were sent. And as it was, we have the boarding group aboard the Asama Maru for 4 more minutes. 4 more minutes. I know. I seriously overestimated part of some of the things I would length of the time I would talk about some things, and underestimated the time I would talk about other things. I should have done more practices, really, but you know. It was an idea I had on Sunday. I hope you all liked it. So, concluding remarks. Ooh, let's see, to conclude. It's not a battle. The Battle of the River Plate is about a battle, but it's not a battle. It's about a diplomatic battle. This isn't even a diplomatic battle, the Asama Maru incident. It's an international incident because of where it took place and what shipping involved. It's an international incident because geography forces the Japanese government to make it into one because of their loss of face. It's an international incident because the Royal Navy did what it did knowing it would cause the affront it would, to try and remind the Japanese just how capable the Royal Navy were. It was a bluff. It worked, but it also backfired. It worked because it reminded the Japanese of the strength of the Royal Navy cruisers and what they could achieve, especially the Town class cruisers. These anti-surface radar vessels which the Royal Navy built, which, as I've said many times before, the best anti-surface radar you can build is a surface radar. But also, it was a good example of the problems that international law can create. If the Royal Navy crew hadn't been quite as well trained, quite as well versed in what they were doing, there is a problem which would come about. They took 21 Germans prisoner. They would end up returning 9 for an agreement that the Japanese would never again transport German merchant sailors. I don't think that rule is still enforced, but you know. Be funny if it was still to this day enforced. Due to the 1940 agreement with Britain, we cannot take you aboard, Captain Hans Mondorf, because we cannot carry German merchant sailors. I don't think it's still enforced. It'd be fun. I'm sure it isn't. But that's what happened. The Royal Navy returned 9. 9 who they categorised as pretty much dunces. And worthless, but who were, when they first examined with the initial interviews conducted by Stoddart, were potentially something, so they were taken away. But that means they keep 12. And those 12 spend the rest of the war languishing at Her Majesty's pleasure. It works. Britain also shuts down a pipeline, but it is a Hail Mary because, oh God, if Liverpool had got caught by a Japanese cruiser, all sorts of what ifs come from that scenario. Anyway, that is now an hour and 20 minutes. Lieutenant Commander Greenway, Lieutenant Colin Madden, and Lieutenant MEP Stoodop have all left the ship. All left Asama Maru and are now heading back to Liverpool with their remaining, the few prisoners left on their pinnace. Hope you've enjoyed today. Take care, and hopefully I get this up in time.